This is 23 ways to organically kill weeds dead to the roots that really work. Here is my plea to the world. Why doesn't someone please make... And those plants are, drum roll please, and I've done all of these methods. Every single one of these methods I have done many times. I can hear some of you right now saying, I've tried that or that did not work, Caleb Warrock. That did not work. I guess I need to make a stand. Whew. Okay, you guys, it is almost 100 degrees here, and tomorrow it is supposed to be 100 degrees here. My wife is asleep, both of the dogs are asleep. I should be asleep because it's been hot, it's hot, and we've been working all day. But here I am making a video for you guys. So please like and subscribe. I've made a full list. Let's get going. Unlike most of the ways listed on the internet, which are completely useless, these 23 ways actually work. Number 1. You can kill weeds to the root by using acid, by acidifying the soil. There are a bunch of ways you can do this. You can buy soil acidifier at any nursery or hardware store or big box garden store. However, in order to get the soil acid enough to kill the weed at the root, you would need to use probably 4 times the amount recommended on the packet. You could also buy pure vinegar. Now, pure vinegar is called glacial acetic acid, and you can buy it. It is a very strong acid, and you would need to be careful with it, and you wouldn't want to use glacial acetic acid all alone by itself. You would want to water it down until it was about 12%. 10 to 12%, maybe even 15%, depending on how hardy your weeds are. Or you can take a gallon of vinegar and boil it down outside, not in your house. I don't recommend breathing fumes from boiling regular vinegar. Vinegar from the grocery store is 5% glacial acetic acid and 95% distilled water. And so it's a 5% acid, and 5% acid will not kill weeds. So to make it a stronger acid, you need to take a gallon of regular vinegar from the grocery store. It doesn't matter what kind. It could be white vinegar, it could be apple cider vinegar, and boil it down until there's only 2 or 3 cups of liquid remaining. You could also make your own natural vinegar. You can look on YouTube for all kinds of videos about that. You can just put, if you have apple trees like I do, I've got a lot of apple trees. If you just put apples in a bucket, like the apples that fall on the ground below the tree, or the apples that have wormholes in them, and fill a 5-gallon bucket full of those apples that you're not going to use anyway, and then fill that bucket with water, so it's just apples and water, and then leave it sitting in the shade of the heat of August or September for a week or 2, it will form vinegar all by itself. It won't be the kind of vinegar that you'd want to drink because it will have little dead bugs in it and it will smell bad, but it will kill weeds, especially if you let it evaporate down to so that you have about, by the time you've removed the apples, then evaporate about half of the water, and then you'll have a good strong vinegar. You can also online get a mother of vinegar and make a vinegar using apples or sugar or any kind of fruit that has sugar in it. Number 2, instead of acidifying your soil, you could alkalinize the soil, meaning raise the pH of your soil to kill weeds at the roots. There are lots of ways you can alkalinize your soil pretty easily. You can use the white powdery ashes from a campfire or from a wood-burning stove and put those pretty thickly on any area, especially in the spring, and then let Mother Nature wet those ashes, or you can spray them with a hose to wet them, and that will alkalinize the soil. You can buy super washing soda at any Walmart in the laundry aisle, or at most of the larger grocery stores in the laundry aisle. Super washing soda, and you can put that powder down. But that will kill everything. It's not selective. It kills everything. You can use hydrated lime, which you can get at any hardware store. You can use cement powder, which you can get at any hardware store. Get the kind with no gravel in it, because you certainly don't want to add gravel to any place where you don't want rocks. You could also use ammonia, which has a pretty high pH, but you might want to pour the ammonia and not spray the ammonia, because you don't really want to breathe the fumes of ammonia. If you're going to alkalinize the soil, I have found that it works best to alkalinize in the autumn and just let Mother Nature soak that alkalinity into the soil through the winter, so that in the spring it kind of acts as a pre-emergent. Number 3, you can use lye spray. Lye is sold in every hardware store in the plumbing aisle for clearing clogged drains. And if you get pure lye, it'll tell you on the package you can mix these crystals, these powdery crystals of lye, with so much water. And if you've ever made homemade soap, this is how you make homemade soap. You just add lye to water, and then the water becomes quite hot. If you're making soap, you add oil, but for this application you don't need to add oil, and you can just spray that hot lye water onto your weeds using a regular garden pump sprayer, and that will kill the weeds. You want to do that while the lye water is hot, and then it will go easily through your garden pump sprayer. And then once you're done spraying, you need to rinse that garden pump sprayer out with clean water. Number 4, you can till your garden. You can buy a tiller, you can rent a tiller, you can borrow a tiller from a neighbor. I recommend that you till it later in the spring, before the weeds have gone to seed, when they're about at the flower stage, when it's a little drier, because if you till too early in the spring, then new weeds will just come up. Where I live, if I wait until about May and early June, then I can till once and it will kill the weeds. But if I till in March or April, then I till and then new baby weeds come up and I would have to till again. Number 5, a lot of people don't realize there's a difference between tilling and cultivating. And I practice no-till gardening. I don't till at all, but I do occasionally, on rare occasions, cultivate. And a cultivator is a machine that looks like a tiller, but it's much more shallow. It only disturbs the top 2 or 3 inches of the soil instead of maybe the top 6 to 12 inches of the soil. A tiller goes a lot deeper than a cultivator. That can mess with the natural fertility of the soil. So I don't use a tiller, I use a cultivator. If I have a large area or a bad outbreak of weeds and I really need to do something mechanical to stop that, then I can use the cultivator. Number 6, use your weed eater. The timing of using your weed eater is pretty critical. You need to use your weed eater when the weeds are reaching flower stage, or not before and not after, because if you weed eat those weeds too early, they're going to grow back, or you're going to clear the ground and sun is going to warm the soil and new weeds are going to sprout and grow. But if you wait too long until the weeds have mature seeds on them, then if you weed eat those weeds, then all you're doing is spreading next year's seeds everywhere. So there's a critical point in the spring where you can weed eat in the flower stage of the weeds. You can weed eat one time, you can completely kill the weeds and prevent them from spreading seeds for the next year. If you like and subscribe, it will make my day. I have a pet peeve about weed eaters. I do have a weed eater and I have used it a couple of times, probably 3 times this year. I don't like to use my weed eater because it leaves that little plastic thread all over the property. And You and I both know that that plastic, when it sits in the sunlight for a couple of months, turns into plastic dust, which becomes pollution on the land, on the property, which I don't want everywhere. So I try to use a weed eater as sparingly as possible. Now here is my plea to the world. Here is my plea to the world. Why doesn't someone please make a weed eater that has a metal a metal knife on it instead of the plastic twine? Because that plastic twine is just making a mess all over the world. We're just adding plastic all over into our lands and gardens and public parkways and parks and everything. And I don't like that. And those companies that make weed eaters are making most of their money from selling that plastic twine that has to go into the weed eater in order for it to cut the weeds. And so that twine is expensive, and they want you to just use it and buy it and use it and buy it for the rest of your life. And so I think that they purposefully do not create a weed eater with a metal knife on it that can be sharpened, that could be reused, that would not produce plastic pollution all over the garden and the yard and the landscape. So if someone would please do that. I've tried to do it. I've tried to modify a couple of weed eaters so that they have a metal knife on them. And they used to make weed eaters where you could kind of modify them, but then they caught on to the fact that people were giving YouTube tutorials on how to change over your existing weed eater so it had a metal knife instead of the plastic you had to buy. And then they all changed their design. And now they've made it so you can't even convert it over. It's very frustrating. If I'm wrong about that, and if any of you have figured out a way to convert an existing weed eater into a metal blade instead of a plastic thread blade, then please comment below and let me know. Number 7, solarization. I can hear some of you right now saying, solarizing, I've tried that, and that did not work, Caleb Warrock. That did not work. That does not work. But if you do it right, it actually does. What I have done, you can use glass or you can use plastic, and I have found it easier to just get a glass tabletop, like a patio table or a living room table with a glass piece from the thrift store. Get as large of one as you can, and then just put that down on the ground, but it needs to be left there for probably at least a year. A lot of people's mistake with solarizing soil is that they leave it there for a couple of weeks, or they leave it there for a month, and then they take it off, but the roots have not been killed. And if the weeds are perennial weeds, then you're going to have to leave that glass there for probably a little more than a full year in order to solarize, to truly kill the roots below there, which is a long process, but I've done it and it does work. You can also use plastic, but it's certainly easier to do with glass because plastic can degrade in the sunlight and then it turns into dust, and you don't want that. And glass is heavier and doesn't move and doesn't blow away, and is pretty cheap and easy to come by those larger pieces of glass like that. Number 10, outcompete. I know of 2 plants. I've been testing this for at least 10 years. I have found 2 plants, and only 2, that can truly outcompete every weed, including rhizomatous quackgrass and other rhizomes. And those plants are, drum roll please, I just forgot what they are. And those plants are lamb's ear, it's a ground cover flowering plant called lamb's ear. It has a woolly, furry, mint green kind of leaf. And Indian mint, which is a pretty rare plant to come across, which I do have. But it's not generally available to the public. Indian mint, it's not a true mint. It's not a true member of the mint family. It has leaves that are shaped like big spearheads. They're kind of serrated, oval-shaped leaves, kind of each of them about the size of my hand, and it is a delicious minty flavor, but it's not a true mint. Both of those plants grow a thick mat, but it's a shallow mat, and they are so dense, and their leaves are so dense that it shades out and prevents all other weeds from growing in their space. And I've been growing those for years and have not had a problem wherever I put them with the weeds being able to get through, no weeds have been able to get through. And I've tried lots of plants. Those are the only 2 plants I can say that about. You can buy lamb's-ear at almost any plant nursery in the United States. I sell seeds for lamb's-ear and on my website, seedrenaissance.com. And if you're interested, if you're not, that's okay too. I'm not offended. And if you want to buy plants, sometimes I sell those live plants, but only in the spring. Number 11, pasteurize your weeds. Not pasteurize like milk, pasteurize. This means, and I'm doing this right now, you guys saw my video a couple of videos ago where I introduced you to Rockets and Jasper, our 2 new guinea pigs, and they are over there right now working on mowing part of the lawn over there. 1 guinea pig will mow about 2 square feet of tall weeds and grass per day. And you can use guinea pigs, you can use rabbits, you can use chickens, you can use guinea hens, you can use guinea fowl, you can use horses, you can use goats, you can use sheep, you can use mini animals like mini horses. I have a mini horse, as you know, if you watch this channel regularly. You can get mini cows. There's all kinds of animals that will come and eat down. If you have a weedy area that can kind of be a pasture area, you can use the larger animals. And if it's a lawn and garden area, you can use animal tractor. Like I have my guinea pigs right now, and you saw in my other video my little wooden tractor, quote unquote, which is just a mobile pen for my guinea pigs, and I just move them every day, and they eat that part of the ground down, and they completely clear it of weeds. And then the next day I move it, and they repeat every single day. And it only takes me about 30 seconds to move their little tractor for them every day. I will tell you that some animals are far better at clearing weeds than other animals. And those animals that are best, I think in my mind, the best of all is a guinea fowl. A guinea fowl is a bird, and I'll try to take a picture of mine. It's a black and white, kind of a strange looking bird. It looks a little bit like a Dr. Seuss bird, like a circus bird. It's about twice as big as a chicken. And a guinea fowl will eat bugs and scratch at weeds and scratch the ground, but will not bother your garden. They're much better at killing weeds and digging weeds and killing them at the roots than chickens are, especially if you will moisten the ground sometimes. Then they can really get in there and get that done. Chickens, if you put them into your garden, they will kill the bugs and dig the weeds, but they will also damage a lot of the garden vegetables too. So chickens, you use them more in the autumn once the garden is all done to come and clear the garden. But if you need something to help you clear weeds and insects out of the garden during the garden season, a guinea fowl is much better at that. Also, guinea pigs, as I've mentioned, are really good at this, and rabbits are really good at this, and they're both quiet, and they just love to eat all day, and they can clear quite a bit of ground. And all you have to have for the guinea pigs, for a guinea fowl, you need to have a fence on your property, and you need to have no dogs around, or at least have a fence in between them and the dogs. Or the guinea pigs and the rabbits, you can just put them in a little tractor and move them around your garden or your weedy area or your pasture or wherever it is you're trying to get rid of your weeds, and it works pretty well. They do need to have at least half of their space in full shade, like my guinea tractor. Anyway, I can give you guys details. If you guys want details, then comment down below, and I'll make a whole video about how to do an animal tractor for this kind of thing, which is a mobile pen for them, because this video is already getting long. Number 12, you can use visqueen and wood chips to permanently make any place on your property weed free. Visqueen is an old name for extruded thick rolled plastic. You can buy visqueen at any hardware store and at all the big box stores, and you can buy it in small pieces or you can buy it in large pieces, and it's not very expensive. When you're using it for an application like this, you want 6 mil, which is it's a thick plastic. And although if it's going to be in an area where there's no foot traffic and no one walking on it or something like that, you can use a 2 mil or a 4 mil. But if there's going to be any foot traffic on it, you'll want to use a 6 mil. You just, on a windless day, lay that visqueen, and it's not called visqueen anymore. That used to be what it's called, but now they just call it, I don't know what, like landscape plastic or, I don't know, rolled plastic. It's in the painter's aisle, in the paint aisle of every big box and hardware store. And you can just go get some of that plastic, lay it in the area where you have weeds growing, and cover it with a thick layer of wood chips, at least 6 inches of wood chips, and then you can just leave it. And the wood chips don't blow away. You don't want to cover it with rocks or gravel because that will destroy the visqueen, but wood chips do not destroy the visqueen. The plastic cannot be exposed to the sunlight or it will degrade, and it is not leaching into your soil because plastic is stable at mesothelic temperatures. It's only unstable at thermophilic temperatures, and I'm not going to go into all that, but you guys can look that up on your own. Number 13, there is another way to do this without using visqueen. If you're really concerned about using plastic, you can get some 100% cotton cloth, like an old sheet at a thrift store, and then you can lay that sheet down and you can cover that with wood chips, and that will last for several years before the weeds can come up through it. So you can do the same thing without visqueen. Number 15, you can just put sheets of plywood down, or you can put sheets of OSB down. Now, if you know anything about what I'm talking about, plywood is more expensive than OSB. Could be about twice as expensive as OSB. Sometimes the thinner plywood is on sale. And I've done all of these methods. Every single one of these methods I have done many times. You can just put the plywood on the ground, done, and be done with it, and it will last for years like that. And that's because plywood is put together with a form of plastic called PVA glue. So plywood has a lot of plastic in it. So if you think you're getting no plastic when you're putting plywood down, you're really not, but whatever. You can put the plywood down and that will just block the weeds altogether, and you don't have to do anything else. If you want to use OSB, which is oriented strand board, which looks a lot like plywood and is sold in the same place in the hardware store, but is half the price. They come in 4x8 sheets, so you can put that on the ground, and if it were me, you would still need to put some wood chips over the top of that in order to protect it from deteriorating. But it would probably last at least 10 years. I had a piece of actual plywood last about 30 years on our property without weeds coming up through it. And I'm using plywood and OSB right now to block weeds in parts of my property. Number 16, one of the worst parts of weeds is weeds that grow up right at the fence line. They grow up right through the fence, like field bindweed and the tall grasses and all kinds of nonsense weeds that grow up right at the base of the fence that drives me and everybody else crazy. And my property is terrible for that, I admit that right now. But there is a way to overcome that, and that is to put a piece of lumber. You could put a piece of lumber under there, a piece of scrap lumber, ideally about 12 inches wide, or you can put a piece of metal. You can get lumber and HVAC metal for free from construction sites with permission. I've done this for many years. You can ask. They are always throwing away scraps of HVAC. HVAC metal is the metal they use to put in your air conditioning and your heating, and they've always got pieces of it. And it's easy to cut with an angle grinder, and you can buy an angle grinder at Harbor Freight for about $20. It's easy to cut like that. You would want at least a 12-inch wide section. You can put it underneath the fence, and that will permanently block the weeds. And if it is metal and it is reflecting on your eyes, you can cover it with wood chips, and that will solve that problem. Number 17, I've done property consultations to help people with their landscapes for 15 years. And a couple of years ago, I had a family that did a property consultation with me, and then they get to ask me questions for 2 years after their consultation. They get to, have me help them with any questions or concerns they have for 2 years afterward. And she contacted me, and she wanted me to provide her with a list of things that she could grow as a lawn alternative. And I gave her a list of lawn alternative, but she rejected all of those ideas because she said, I want it to be just like grass. I want it to be a high traffic area that you can walk on it, and the kids can play on it, and the grandkids can play on it, and the animals can be on it, and it won't allow the weeds to go in. But I don't want to have to mow it, and I don't want to have to water it. And I had to explain to her that in the climate where we live, where there's absolutely no summer water at all, no rain at all, that you can't do that. Maybe in some places there are lawn alternatives, which we won't discuss in this video. And if you would like me to do a video on lawn alternatives, I could do that. But there is a reason why people plant grass in their lawns, and that is because you can mow it and it looks nice and it keeps the weeds out. So if you want to have an area that is weed free in your property, there is a reason why people put grass down. You can put grass down and mow it, and if you're like me, all the grass clippings that you mow, and that does have clover in it and black medic in it and bindweed in it and dandelions, but you just mow it before they can go to seed. If you're mowing once a week with an electric mower, which I have an electric mower, and then you just mow it every week before it goes to seed, and those weeds don't spread. And dandelions I do cut out with a knife, and I feed all of my grass clippings to my horse and to my guinea pigs and rabbits, and they love it. And also it makes great mulch because we don't spray any chemicals or use any petrochemical fertilizers, so it's really clean grass clippings. We can use it as mulch. I use it for compost, and I feed it to the animals. So if you have an area that you really want weed free, consider putting in a lawn and just not watering very often. You don't have to water 3 times a week. Even where I live, where it is 100 degrees, you don't have to water 3 times a week. And if you do water 3 times a week, you can water for like 5 minutes instead of for 45 minutes. Number 18. Speaking of dandelions, there is a way to weed once, and that is to make sure, if you are going to all the work and trouble of pulling weeds or digging weeds, which we try not to do because I'm trying to give you a whole list here of how to avoid doing that. But sometimes we need to pull and dig weeds. Most weeds have a growth plate. If you cut above the growth plate, that weed will just grow right back. Within a week, it'll be as big as it was. And if you cut below the growth plate, it kills the weed. Okay, everyone, this is the 3rd time that I've tried to film this video. You know this must going to be a good video because everything is aligned to try to stop me from filming this video. The camera overheated and flashed a sign that said, the device is too hot, we're shutting it down, because it was 100 degrees outside. So, fun. Now it is a little more toward evening, and so I'm going to try to pick up where we left off. If you have found any of this information to be useful, please leave me a comment below. You know that will make my day, and I love it when you guys make my day. Also, the growth plate, cutting the growth plate does not work on rhizomatous weeds, and I can explain that in another video if you're interested. Number 19 is, if you have a pet that will eat the weeds like I do. I've got 2 guinea pigs right now. I don't have any rabbits at the moment, but I have 2 guinea pigs and I have a horse, and all 3 of those animals will eat whatever weeds I will pull for them. And every day I pull weeds for them and feed them to them. And so that just is me feeding the animals. And if you have kids or you have grandkids, that helps to get them to help you to keep the garden and the yard weed free, because you don't use the word weeding. You just say, hey, we're going to go feed the guinea pigs, or we're going to go feed the horse, and this is what, if you'll pull some of these, this is what will make the guinea pigs and the horse really happy. And they'll help you pull it, and they'll help you every day if your animals are cute. Also, there's something called Grandpa's Weeding Tool that is kind of having a moment apparently online these days. My friend gave me one of these tools because they were moving to a different property and decided they didn't want to use it anymore. As soon as I got it, my other friend borrowed it. I think that my other friend is watching. Hi, Kathleen, and has not returned it yet. So I don't know if she's tried it or not tried it. But that Grandpa's Weeding Tool does work. I did use it a couple of times on my front lawn to pull dandelions, and it does work. It's not as fast as just cutting it with a knife. And I felt like it required a lot more bending over than just sitting on the ground and cutting them with the knife. But I've been cutting them with a knife for years, and I'm pretty fast at it. So, but if you want to try the Grandpa's weeding tool, they're like $40 on Amazon or something. Number 20, and I think this is a way that is overlooked because we have an acre and a half of property, and a lot of people, because when I do a property consultation, after I visit their property, they come and visit my property so that they can see all of these concepts that I teach them in real life working, and I can prove to them that the advice I'm giving them is going to work. And a lot of people say, oh, wow, it must be so great to have an acre and a half. Well, I used to have a 40-acre farm, and I sold my 40-acre farm because 40 acres is a lot. It's too much for one person. And now that I'm 980 years old, wow, I look good for 980 years old, don't I? Now that I'm 980 years old, an acre and a half is getting to be a lot of land for me too. And so right now there are some weeds out there. I haven't got all the weeds out of an acre and a half. It's a lot of work. So number 20 is, don't own more land than you can realistically handle. Don't create a garden that is larger than you can realistically handle. Don't create flower beds that are larger than you can realistically handle, especially if you are not designing them to be weed-free. If you do not know how to practice weed-free gardening, and I could do a $2 class on weed-free gardening if you guys wanted, but there are ways to make sure that you don't get invasions of rhizomatous grasses in your gardens or in your landscaping. Before you go to all that work, make sure you've got the size of garden and landscape that is going to work for you and your lifestyle, your energy level, and your health and your desire. Not everybody can handle an acre and a half. So maybe you need a quarter acre. Maybe you need an eighth of an acre. Maybe you can do an acre. Maybe you can do a half of an acre. Maybe you can do 5 acres. I mean, I have friends who have all of those property sizes. Maybe you can do a balcony. You do what is going to work for you, and then you won't be overwhelmed with weeds if you have the right size of property. Number 21. Not for nothing, if you're new to this channel, there is a video I made probably more than a decade ago, probably 12 years ago. I have created a weed killer recipe. It is people call it my salad dressing recipe because it is edible and it does kill weeds, and it is available if you look under natural remedies, the natural remedies booklet at seedrenaissance.com. You can buy it there, or you can get it free with certain seed orders. Number 22. I have certain areas of my garden, my pathways especially. Pathways can be hard because pathways especially in a garden like mine where it's all heirloom seeds, and heirloom seeds are the kind of seeds that reproduce after their own kind as opposed to hybrid seeds that do not. And so because I only use heirloom seeds, sometimes you get things growing in your pathways, vegetables growing in your pathways. Right now, in my pathways, I have Orex spinach growing on my pathways, I have strawberry spinach growing in my pathways, I have blackberries trying to creep into my pathways. There's things going into my pathways. And so rather than fight those pathways and have to weed them all the time, I simply made a boardwalk over the top of the pathway, because I know people who build homes for a living, and they will let me take their what are called cutoffs, their leftover. My dogs are hollering at someone. They will let me take their leftover and unused lumber scraps, and I can get enough pieces of, like 45 inches. I think my pathways are 45 inches. And if I can get enough pieces of 45-inch lumber, I have probably 120 feet of boardwalk pathway that is just there simply to cover up so I don't have to deal with weeds. It works beautifully. And finally, the last one. We're at the last one, everyone. We're at the last one. The last one I will never forget. years ago. Oh, I don't even want to say how many years ago. It's probably been more than 30 years. I happened to see Martha Stewart on television. This was years ago. And Martha Stewart had a show, and she was showing people how she had created her weed-free garden. Now, for years, Martha Stewart has told people, if you want to organically get rid of weeds, you need to boil water and pour boiling water on the weeds. Well, you could do that with an electric kettle if you have a very small garden or a very small weed problem, but that's really not going to work for a lot of people. If I had to kill weeds with boiling water, that would cost so much and take so long to boil that amount of water. I can't even imagine. But anyway, so she has a whole weed-free garden, or at least she used to, and she went through and showed us that this is crazy. This is 1%, you guys. This is how the 1% have a weed-free garden. She went through and showed us that she had excavators and a whole, construction crew come in and she had a big garden, remove all of the soil from her garden down 6 feet deep, had all of that soil trucked off, and then had it all replaced with really great weed-free sterile garden compost. I was gobsmacked. I will never forget that. What's the word I'm looking for? I was so depressed about the whole thing, because I thought, if she had to spend, she must have spent $100,000. She spent an enormous amount of money to get all that work done. If she had to spend all of that money to have a weed-free vegetable garden, I think there's no hope for the rest of us. Luckily for you, I've been working on it ever since. However, I will say that there is a modern-day equivalent of what Martha Stewart did in those days, and that is just to have a raised bed garden. And if you design your raised bed garden correctly, you can have a weed-free raised bed garden. Make sure you do it right the first time. It's a lot cheaper. Bonus footage of what does not work to kill weeds, and I have tested them and tried them. A thick layer of just wood chips with no liner does not work. I have tested this to 4 feet deep, and rhizomatous quackgrass and bindweed both grow right through 4 feet of wood chips. And it doesn't seem to matter. Now, if you live in a place with a lot of humidity and rain, that might be different, because it might create enough heat in the wood chips as they decompose to sterilize the ground below and to kill anything that is trying to make its way up above. But unless you live in a place with enough water and humidity to make that possible, then that's not ever going to work. Another thing that does not work, in my humble opinion, I grew up on a farm where we used propane torches. And we would have to go and burn the weeds out of the ditches every year with propane torches. Not always with propane torches. Sometimes we just lit a fire and we would burn the ditches so that the water could flow to the farm. And I think that's okay. But propane torches, it's so hot, it's so miserable. You have to breathe in the fumes of the fire. I just don't like it. Some people still do use a propane torch. It's not for me. The worst weeding in the world is putting down gravel and rocks. So I know a lot of people who think, oh, look, my parking strip is going to be weed-free. I'm going to put 4 inches of gravel in there and then it's going to be weed-free. Never going to work. Never going to happen. You're going to have the worst weeding in the world, because all of those weeds are just going to collect. The seeds are going to collect. The rhizomatous ones are going to go right up through the bottom. It's going to be filled full of weeds within a couple of years, and you're still going to have to weed all of that. Also, the woven weed fabric. Things that they sell at the big box stores that are called weed fabric that are woven are useless. And I have been telling people this for years. And then about 13 years ago or so, the Extension Service actually put out a bulletin. And the title of the bulletin was, and I quote, "Weed fabric is the worst weed in the garden." And I thought, I've been telling people this for years. Why would nobody listen to me? Well, even after the Extension Service put out that bulletin, people still buy miles of weed fabric every year, lay it down, and put gravel or some other nonsense on the top of it. Never going to work. If it is a woven fabric, it's not going to stop the weeds. And weeds that are rhizomatous, like quackgrass and bindweed, you actually can't even pull them. They get woven right into the fabric, and it becomes a horrible, awful mess. Another thing, years ago, when we've lived in this house for 23 years, and when I first came here 23 years ago, I got someone to give me some used carpet scraps for free, and I put those down in certain areas of the garden so that I could have weed-free pathways. Same thing. Fabric is, carpet is woven, and the weeds eventually grew. It took a couple of years, I will grant you that. But after a couple of years, the weeds grew right through the weave of the carpet, and it made a huge, awful mess. And it was so heavy and so hard to get out of the garden, I had to get my friends to come and help me. So don't put down carpet. Along that same lines, there are a lot of people who put down cardboard and paper. Paper today is made with a lot of chemical. And if you have newspaper or something that has colored ink on it, colored ink is made with heavy metals. So black ink is made mostly in the United States with soy. It's soy-based ink. But colored inks are made with heavy metals, and you don't want that in your garden either. Even if you felt that cardboard and paper were safe to put in your garden, you put those down, you put some wood chips on them, you do whatever, they're going to be gone in a couple of years. They're going to have incorporated themselves into your soil, and you're still going to have the weed problem. It's not a solution. Last one. The worst, and this is just me, take this with a grain of salt, but unless you love cancer, you really, really are determined to give yourself some cancer, I would not spray an herbicide. And I know not everyone agrees with that philosophy, and you do you. But I will tell you that I know lots and lots of people who defended herbicides until they or someone in their family had cancer. And then suddenly they want to eat organic, they want to do organic, they regret all of the nonsense chemicals they've sprayed and they've put in. And my friends and family who have sprayed chemical herbicides for years, like actually did the physical spraying of it for years, I don't know any of them who have not ended up with cancer at the end of their life. To me, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. None of those chemicals are tested for long-term cancer to see if they in the long term cause cancer. Do they cause cancer within 24 hours? No, that's pretty clear. They do not cause cancer within 24 hours. They don't even seem to cause cancer within a few years, but repeated use over years is increasingly coming into question. If I were you, I would stay away from it. But you do you. You love cancer? Go get some herbicide and spray it all over your property. One of my favorite memories, back in the day, there was a show on TV called Larry King Live, and he had the World Health Organization, which, we won't go into that, but the World Health Organization had declared the Roundup, what was called, in those days was called Roundup, today we call it glyphosate, had declared Roundup to be a carcinogen. And they had put out a statement saying that they felt like it was dangerous to people's health and that needed to be taken into account. And so Larry King had on his show a representative of Monsanto, and they came there to defend their product. And Larry King handed, you can look this up on YouTube, handed that person a glass of Roundup and said, if it is so safe, will you drink this glass of Roundup? Of course, the representative was not going to drink a glass of herbicide. I just thought that was genius move to put that on television. I feel the same way. If you don't feel confident in drinking a glass of the herbicide, why are you spraying it on your property? Why are you putting it on your garden? Do you have any idea how that biodegrades, if that biodegrades, and if it does biodegrade, what it biodegrades to become? Is its biodegraded self inert, or is it poisonous? Does it biodegrade at all? If you don't know the answers to those questions, you probably should not be spraying it on your property. Well, that was my soapbox, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it, you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Out.